A tech billionaire paused after an important meeting to buy a cup of coffee, only to feel a sudden flush of embarrassment when he reached for his wallet and realized it was gone. He stood there fumbling through his pockets, the line behind him growing restless, when a crumpled $2 bill appeared on the counter. A young black boy, thin and quiet, with a backpack slung low and sneakers worn thin from walking, had paid for the drink. Without waiting for thanks, he simply turned and walked away, leaving behind only a handful of words that landed with unexpected weight. "You don't need to pay me back." Those words stirred something deep in Nathaniel Crow. He felt them settle in his chest like a question he hadn't known he needed to answer. Before he could think twice, he found himself following the boy down a narrow alley, drawn by a pull he couldn't name. What he would discover in the hours ahead would reach far beyond that single cup of coffee and touch the most hidden corners of his own life. New Orleans met Nathaniel Crow the way it always had: slow, humid, and unapologetically honest. He had come for a conference on social impact investing, a closed-door gathering inside a polished hotel near the river. There had been panels, careful handshakes, and promises spoken in measured language. By the time it ended, the sun was already sinking low, and Nathaniel chose to walk rather than call for the car waiting somewhere behind him. Trim lay just a few blocks away. The neighborhood caught the last light of day without trying to impress anyone. Shotgun houses leaned into one another like old friends who had seen too much together, their paint curling in patient strips. A faded restaurant sign flickered and steadied. Somewhere down the street, a trumpet cried softly, jazz spilling from a bar that had outlasted most expectations. Nathaniel slowed his pace. Every step felt strangely familiar, not as memory exactly, but as recognition without names. This had been home once, or close enough to it. Now it felt like a place he was passing through, a language he used to speak, but no longer trusted himself to answer in. He adjusted his jacket, the fabric too clean for the cracked pavement beneath his shoes. At 42, a tech billionaire whose life looked orderly from a distance, he felt the order beginning to thin. At an intersection near North Claiborne Avenue, he stopped. The air smelled like coffee, burnt, bitter, unmistakable. Nathaniel hesitated, then turned toward it, unaware that a moment this small was already shifting its weight, preparing to follow him much farther than the walk itself. The barista glanced at the bill, then at the hand that had placed it there. It wasn't Nathaniel's. The boy stood just behind him, perhaps 12, wrapped in an oversized gray hoodie despite the lingering heat. A backpack hung low on one shoulder, the zipper held together with a small safety pin. His sneakers were scuffed at the toes, the soles worn thin from real miles. "Cover it," the boy said. No explanation, no hesitation. The barista shrugged and rang it up, sliding the cup toward Nathaniel and tucking the bill away without ceremony. "You're good," he muttered, already moving on. Nathaniel turned fully. "You didn't have to do that." The boy's eyes met his, dark, steady, unreadable, not shy, not proud, just direct. "I know." Nathaniel held the cup but didn't drink. "Let me pay you back." The boy shook his head once, a clean, final motion. "Just pass it on." The words landed heavier than they should have. Nathaniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. He searched for something to offer. Money? Gratitude? Context? But none of it felt right. The boy hadn't stepped forward for thanks. He hadn't even looked at the coffee. Instead, he adjusted the strap of his backpack and turned away. As he walked, Nathaniel noticed the details he hadn't caught at first. The way the boy favored one shoe slightly. The way he moved like someone used to navigating crowded sidewalks alone. He pushed through the foot traffic without looking back, already blending into the street. Nathaniel stayed where he was, the coffee still warm in his hands. The city hummed around him, indifferent. A trumpet laughed somewhere down the block, then fell quiet. He took a sip. It tasted the same as it always had. And yet, something had shifted. By the time Nathaniel looked up again, the boy was nearly gone. Just another figure moving toward Treme, carrying a weight that didn't show on his shoulders. Without fully deciding to, Nathaniel stepped off the curb and followed at a distance. Curiosity tightened into something quieter, more deliberate. Not to interfere, just to understand. He kept his distance, not close enough to be noticed, not far enough to lose him, just a few paces behind, moving with the quiet discipline of someone who had learned long ago how to disappear in plain sight. The boy turned east, away from the brighter streets, cutting through intersections where the sidewalks cracked wider and the streetlights grew farther apart. Traffic thinned. The sound of jazz faded into something more distant, replaced by the low hum of evening, dogs barking behind fences, a radio murmuring through an open window, the scrape of a broom against concrete. Nathaniel matched his pace without thinking. The boy didn't rush. He walked with intention, each step measured, as if time itself was something he had learned to manage carefully. At one corner, he paused to let a group pass, then crossed without looking back. At another, he stepped around a pothole filled with rainwater, the movement practiced, almost automatic. Nathaniel noticed the small things, the way the boy checked his surroundings before entering a store, the way his shoulders tightened when a car slowed nearby, then relaxed when it passed, the way he never reached into his pockets while walking, keeping his hands visible and empty. This wasn't caution learned from lectures. It was lived. They stopped at a small pharmacy squeezed between a laundromat and a boarded-up storefront. The neon sign flickered weakly, spelling only half the word before giving up. Nathaniel waited across the street and watched through the window. The boy approached the counter without leaning or fidgeting. He placed a few items down. Medicine. Generic. Nothing branded. The pharmacist spoke briefly, tone neutral. The boy nodded, then reached into his pocket. Change spilled into his palm. He counted it carefully, once, then twice, sliding coins back and forth with his thumb until the amount felt right. The pharmacist waited without comment. When the boy finished, the man scooped the coins into the register and pushed the bag toward him. No discounts, no charity, just a transaction. The boy tucked the bag into his backpack and stepped back outside. Nathaniel crossed the street as the door shut behind him. They continued on. The houses grew older here, shotgun homes with narrow porches and sagging steps, paint bleached by decades of sun. Some were cared for, flowers planted carefully along the front. Others leaned into disrepair, windows dark, doors chained shut like held breaths. The boy turned onto a quieter block. Here the streetlights cast uneven pools of yellow light, leaving long stretches of shadow between them. Nathaniel slowed further, letting the distance stretch just a bit more. He wasn't sure why he was doing this. He only knew that turning back felt wrong. The boy stopped once, bending to adjust his shoe. The sole was coming loose near the toe, held together with a strip of dark tape. He pressed it back into place, tying the laces tighter than before, then stood and kept walking. Nathaniel felt a flicker of something in his chest. Not pity, but recognition. The memory of fixing things that were already past fixing, just enough to get through another day. They reached a corner store. The boy went in again. This time, Nathaniel stepped closer, pretending to study a flyer taped to a lamppost. Inside, the boy picked up a small bag of rice, a loaf of bread, a can of soup. Nothing more. He hesitated in front of the cooler, fingers brushing the glass, then shook his head and stepped away. At the counter, he paid in cash, more coins. Nathaniel watched the cashier glance at the amount, then at the boy. A pause. The boy met his eyes calmly. After a second, the cashier nodded and bagged the items without comment. Outside again, the boy shifted the weight of his backpack, now heavier, pulling the strap higher on his shoulder. He didn't complain. He didn't sigh. He simply adjusted and moved on. Nathaniel felt the city closing in around them, not physically, but emotionally. Each block peeled away another layer of distance between who he had become and who he had once been. He hadn't walked these streets like this in a very long time, not with purpose, not with nothing waiting at the other end. They turned onto a block that felt different, quieter, more personal. The boy slowed, then stopped in front of a small wooden house. The paint was chipped, the porch railing warped with age, but the place was clean, swept, cared for. A single light glowed inside, warm and steady. The boy climbed the steps and set the grocery bag down carefully by the door, then the medicine. He didn't knock right away. Instead, he sat on the top step, elbows resting on his knees, backpack still on his shoulders. He stared out at the street, breathing slowly, as if releasing something he had been carrying since morning. Nathaniel stayed back, half hidden by a tree. The boy reached up and rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands, just once, then straightened, squared his shoulders, and stood. Only then did he open the door. Light spilled out briefly before the door closed behind him. Nathaniel remained where he was. The street felt still now. No cars passed, no voices carried. Even the air seemed to pause, waiting. He hadn't planned to come this far. He hadn't planned anything beyond a cup of coffee. And yet, here he was, standing on a quiet block in Treme, watching a house that meant nothing to him, and somehow, everything. A question pressed at the edge of his mind, insistent but unformed. Not who is he, but how did he become this way? Nathaniel took a step forward, then stopped. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. He exhaled slowly, made a decision he hadn't named yet, and started toward the house, careful this time, not to follow, but to approach. Whatever waited on those steps, he sensed, was not something meant to be observed from a distance. He stopped a few feet from the porch, close enough to be seen, far enough to leave space. The boy turned first, his body shifting instantly, shoulders tightening, weight settling back on his heels. Not fear exactly, readiness, the kind that came from learning early that strangers didn't always announce what they wanted. "I'm sorry," Nathaniel said before the silence could harden. "I don't mean to scare you." The boy studied him for a moment, long enough to decide whether the apology was real. "You followed me," he said. It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. "Yes," Nathaniel replied. He didn't rush it. "I did." Another pause. The porch light hummed faintly above them. Somewhere down the block, a door slammed, then the sound faded again. The boy glanced back at the house, then at Nathaniel. "Why?" Nathaniel considered the easy answers and set them aside. "Because I wanted to understand," he said, "and because I didn't want to pretend I hadn't." The boy watched him closely, measuring something that had nothing to do with words. After a beat, he stepped aside slightly. Not an invitation, just permission. "You can sit," he said. "If you want." Nathaniel nodded. "If that's okay." He moved slowly, deliberately, lowering himself onto the edge of the step. He kept his hands visible, resting loosely on his knees. The wood creaked under his weight, but held. Neither of them spoke. The boy leaned back against the railing, arms folded loosely across his chest. Up close, Nathaniel could see the exhaustion beneath the composure, the faint shadows under his eyes, the way his jaw tightened and relaxed as if he were constantly holding something back. "You didn't have to pay for my coffee," Nathaniel said finally. The boy shrugged. "I know. I wasn't going to argue with the guy," Nathaniel continued. "I just forgot my wallet." "That happens," the boy said. "To you." The boy's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Not really," Nathaniel nodded, accepting the answer for what it was. "I'm Nathaniel, by the way. Jabari." They shook hands. Jabari's grip was firm, not challenging, not timid, just steady. "You live here?" Nathaniel asked. Jabari nodded toward the door behind him. "With my grandma." Nathaniel glanced at the house again. "She inside?" "Yeah. She doesn't sleep much these days." There was something careful in the way Jabari said it, like he was choosing words that wouldn't weigh too much. Nathaniel leaned back slightly, letting the silence settle again. He wasn't in a hurry. For once, nothing was waiting for him. "I saw you at the pharmacy," he said. Jabari didn't look surprised. "Okay. And the store?" "Okay." Nathaniel smiled faintly. "You do a lot for someone your age." Jabari shifted, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. "Someone has to." The words were simple. The meaning wasn't. "You help a lot of people," Nathaniel said, "even when you don't have much yourself." Jabari glanced at him, eyes narrowing just slightly. "You keeping track?" "No," Nathaniel said quickly. "I'm just noticing." Jabari seemed to relax a fraction. "My grandma says, just because you're struggling doesn't mean you get to be selfish. If you can help, you should. Even a little." Nathaniel felt the words settle somewhere deep, stirring something old. "She sounds wise." "She is," Jabari replied, without hesitation. They sat quietly, listening to the night breathe around them. The city felt different here, not alive exactly, but awake, holding. After a while, Nathaniel spoke again. "You remind me of someone I knew." Jabari tilted his head. "Who?" Nathaniel looked out at the street, at the way the light pulled unevenly along the pavement. "A kid," he said. "A long time ago. He didn't have much either. But he figured out early how to survive without letting it harden him. That's rarer than people think." Jabari considered that. "Did it work?" Nathaniel smiled, though there was no humor in it. "It took a while." Another silence, not uncomfortable. "Samamamon?" "You're just full." "You going to tell me why you're really here?" Jabari asked. Nathaniel turned to him and met his eyes. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "I just know that paying for that coffee wasn't nothing. And neither was the way you did it." Jabari nodded slowly, as if accepting that for now. From inside the house came a soft sound, a cough, muffled but persistent. Jabari's posture changed instantly, alert, focused. "I should go in," he said, already standing. "Of course," Nathaniel replied, rising with him. Jabari hesitated, then looked back. "You can stay a minute if you want." Nathaniel nodded. "I'd like that." Jabari opened the door, warm light spilling out onto the porch once more. As Nathaniel followed, he felt a familiar unease settle in his chest. Not fear, but anticipation. Whatever waited inside that house, he sensed, wasn't just a continuation of the night. It was the beginning of something he wasn't sure he was ready to name. The sound that carried Nathaniel back wasn't the cough from inside the house. It was the way Jabari had said, "Someone has to." The words stayed with him as he sat there, the porch boards warm beneath him, the night thick with cicadas and distant sirens. He didn't move. He didn't speak. His gaze drifted past the street, past the present, until the world around him thinned and gave way to something older. Memories from his own difficult youth in New Orleans surfaced, pulling him back to a time long ago when he had been just a boy himself, struggling to survive on these same streets. Back then, the city hadn't felt tired. It had felt loud, impatient, full of doors that closed quickly and streets that never quite belonged to him. Nathaniel had been much younger then, still a boy, navigating hunger that wasn't sharp, but dull and constant, the kind that made everything feel slower. Thoughts, steps, hope. He had learned early which dumpsters were worth checking and which weren't, the rhythm of restaurants closing, how to drink water slowly to trick his body into thinking it had been fed. Nights were worse. He slept where he could, under awnings near the French Quarter, behind delivery entrances, once even on a broken bench near the river until security chased him off. The cold surprised people when they thought of New Orleans, but he remembered it well. Damp, creeping, getting into your clothes and staying there. People passed him every day. Some looked away quickly. Some stared too long. A few offered change, almost apologetically, as if embarrassed by the act of noticing. He thanked them all the same. Gratitude was safer than anger. Gratitude didn't get you moved along. He told himself it was temporary. He always told himself that. The diner sat on a corner. He walked past often. Cheap food, bright lights, warmth that spilled out every time the door opened. He would sit across the street and watch people eat, watch steam rise from plates, watch hands wrap around mugs. One night, the hunger won. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, maybe 3. His hands shook as he sat there, knees pulled to his chest, trying to keep what little warmth he had. He watched a couple leave the diner, laughing, a to-go box balanced between them. For a moment, he thought about asking. He didn't. He rarely did. That was when she appeared. She didn't come straight to him. She walked past once, then stopped, turned, looked again, not quickly, not with the practiced glance of someone checking for danger or inconvenience. She looked the way people do when they are trying to understand something rather than dismiss it. She was middle-aged then, hair pulled back, wearing a jacket that had seen use, but was still cared for. Not wealthy, not polished, just solid. She crossed the street. "Hey," she said gently, crouching so they were closer to eye level. "When's the last time you ate?" Nathaniel froze. He wasn't used to questions that didn't come with conditions. "I'm fine," he said automatically. She nodded as if she expected that answer. "That wasn't what I asked." He didn't respond. She stood without pushing. "I'm going to get you something. You can leave if you want. I'll put it right here." She didn't wait for permission. She went into the diner. Nathaniel stared at the door, half expecting her not to come back. That was how these things usually went, intentions dissolved by distance. But the door opened again a minute later. She came out carrying a tray. "Sit," she said, placing it beside him on the curb. Eggs, toast, bacon, coffee with cream already mixed in. The smell hit him hard. He didn't cry, he didn't speak. He ate. She didn't rush him, didn't ask questions. She sat a few feet away, giving him space, sipping her own coffee. Every now and then she glanced over, checking not how fast he was eating, but whether he was still there. When he finished, she waited a moment, then asked, "You got somewhere safe tonight?" He shrugged. "I manage." She studied him more closely this time, the dirt on his shoes, the thin jacket, the way his shoulders never fully relaxed. "You going to school?" she asked. He laughed softly. "No." She nodded once, like she was filing the answer away. "You want to?" He hesitated, then very quietly, "Yeah." She didn't promise anything. She didn't smile wide or make it sound easy. "Okay," she said. "Then let's see what we can do." That night wasn't the end of his hunger. It wasn't the end of sleeping rough or feeling invisible, but it was the first interruption. She came back, not every day, but often enough that he started to recognize the sound of her footsteps. Sometimes she brought food. Sometimes she brought information, names of places, addresses scribbled on scraps of paper, a community center that helped kids get back into school, a shelter that didn't separate people by age after dark. She didn't walk him everywhere. She didn't hover. She pointed, explained, then let him decide. Once she brought him a jacket. It wasn't new. It fit a little too big. He wore it until the sleeves frayed. Another time, she sat with him outside the center while he waited to talk to someone inside. He was nervous. He told her so. "Being nervous means you care," she said. "That's not a weakness." He held on to that longer than the jacket. Weeks turned into months. He learned her routine. She worked at a school cafeteria, volunteered when she could. New people, not powerful people, but connected ones, the kind who showed up, who knew where to push gently and where to wait. When he finally enrolled in school, she didn't celebrate like it was a miracle. "Good," she said. "That's a start." The day he got his first set of textbooks, he didn't know where to put them. He didn't own a bag sturdy enough to carry them. He balanced them awkwardly against his chest, afraid to set them down. She watched him struggle for a moment, then handed him something small, a silver coin. It was worn smooth at the edges, older than both of them. He turned it over in his fingers, confused. "What's this for?" he asked. She smiled, not wide, but warm. "It's not for spending." "Then what?" "For remembering," she said. When things feel like they're slipping, you hold on to something solid, something that reminds you that you're still here. He frowned. "What if I lose it?" "Then you learn to take care of what matters," she said. "Either way, you'll be okay." He kept it in his pocket. Always the same pocket. He touched it when he was scared, when he was tired, when he felt like the world was closing in again. She never asked for it back. Years passed. He grew, changed, learned how to blend in just enough, how to sit in a classroom without flinching at sudden noises, how to trust teachers who didn't raise their voices, how to imagine a future that extended beyond the end of the week. He saw her less as time went on. Life pulled them in different directions, but whenever they crossed paths, she asked the same questions. "You eating? You learning? You okay?" And he always answered honestly. The last time he saw her, he was barely more than a boy himself. Taller, cleaner, carrying a borrowed backpack that didn't smell like the street. She looked tired that day, but she smiled when she saw him. "Look at you," she said, still standing. He wanted to say thank you, wanted to say everything, but the words tangled up inside him, heavy and inadequate. "I'll do something with this," he said instead, gesturing vaguely to himself. "I promise." She nodded, satisfied. "I know." Then, she walked away. He never saw her again. Life moved fast after that. College, work, opportunities that came wrapped in risk and ambition. He learned new languages, code, contracts, negotiation, learned how to build things that scaled, things that reached far beyond one city. But he never forgot the coin. It sat now, years later, in the same pocket of his wallet. On the porch in Treme, Nathaniel shifted slightly, the memory loosening its grip. Inside the house, something moved. A soft shuffle, the creak of a bed. Jabari's voice followed, low and gentle. Nathaniel exhaled slowly. He hadn't come back to New Orleans to remember, but memory, it seemed, had been waiting for him anyway. The house was smaller on the inside than Nathaniel expected. Not cramped, just carefully measured, as if every object had learned exactly how much space it was allowed to take. The light came from a single lamp near the far wall, its yellow glow softening the edges of the room. Shadows gathered in the corners, patient and unmoving. The air smelled of herbal tea and medicine, something faintly floral underneath, clean but lived in. Jabari stepped inside first, setting the grocery bag down on a small table near the door. He moved quietly, deliberately, as though sound itself might be a burden here. Nathaniel followed a moment later, closing the door gently behind him. On the bed near the window lay an elderly woman propped up by thin pillows. Her frame was slight, almost fragile, but her posture held a dignity that hadn't faded with age. Her hair, streaked with gray, was braided neatly over one shoulder. When she turned her head, her eyes, dark, alert, found Jabari immediately. "You're home, baby," she said. Her voice was soft, worn smooth by time rather than weakness. "Did you eat?" "I'm fine, Grandma," Jabari replied, pouring water into a chipped glass. "I got your medicine." She smiled at that, not broadly, just enough. Then her gaze shifted. Nathaniel felt it land on him like a hand resting on his chest, light, curious, unafraid. "And who's this?" she asked. Jabari hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "This is Nathaniel. He stopped by." Nathaniel stepped forward, keeping his movements unhurried. "Ma'am," he said, "it's nice to meet you." She studied him the way people used to, slowly, without hurry, without apology. Not searching for status, not impressed by presence, just looking. "Lorraine Ellis," she said at last. "You're welcome here." "Thank you," Nathaniel replied. He meant it more deeply than he expected. Jabari handed her the glass of water and the medicine. She took them without comment, swallowing carefully. When she was done, she rested the glass on the table beside her and leaned back slightly, breathing evenly. Nathaniel took in the room. A small bookshelf against the wall, its shelves uneven under the weight of paperbacks and old folders, a stack of folded blankets at the foot of the bed. On the far wall, several framed photographs hung crookedly, their edges yellowed with time. Families, children, school events, community gatherings. His chest tightened. "You raised Jabari yourself?" Nathaniel asked gently. Lorraine nodded. "Since he was little. That couldn't have been easy," she smiled faintly. "Most important things aren't." Jabari leaned against the wall, arms crossed loosely, listening but not interrupting. "You worked around here," Nathaniel continued. "All my life," Lorraine said. "School cafeteria for years. Volunteered when I could. People always think you need money to help. Most of the time, you just need to show up." The words settled heavily in the room. Nathaniel shifted slightly in his chair. Something about her cadence, unhurried, unembellished, stirred something uneasy in him, a familiarity he couldn't place. "And Jabari," he said, glancing toward the boy. "He helps a lot of people." Lorraine followed his gaze, pride flickering across her face. "He's got a good heart. Sometimes too good." Jabari rolled his eyes. "Grandma," she waved him off gently. "It's true." Nathaniel smiled, then grew thoughtful. "Where did he learn that?" Lorraine's expression softened. "Life teaches you quickly what matters when it doesn't give you much." She paused, then added, "And I tried to remind him that kindness doesn't mean disappearing." Nathaniel's breath caught. The words were close enough to something he remembered that it unsettled him. "You sound like you've thought about that a lot," he said. Lorraine nodded once. "I've seen people give until there's nothing left of them. That's not the kind of good the world needs." She looked tired suddenly, not physically, something deeper. The weight of years layered quietly on her shoulders. "My son thought leaving would make things better," she said, almost to herself. Jabari's posture stiffened. Nathaniel didn't interrupt. "He was a good boy once," Lorraine continued. "Bright, always drawing. Said he'd paint murals all over this city someday." Her mouth curved faintly, then stilled. "Life took a different turn." She fell silent. The room held the pause without pressing. "He left," she said after a while. "Thought he was saving us from himself. Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. I stopped trying to untangle it a long time ago." Jabari stared at the floor. Nathaniel felt something click softly in his mind. Not a full picture, just a fragment sliding into place. The way she spoke, the patience in her pauses, the absence of bitterness. He glanced again at the photographs on the wall. One in particular drew his attention. A younger Lorraine stood in the center, smiling warmly, her arm around a group of children. They were outside a school building. He recognized the architecture before he could name it. His pulse quickened. "Is that—" He stopped himself. Lorraine noticed his gaze. "That was from years ago," she said. "School fundraiser. We were trying to keep the after-school program open." Nathaniel swallowed. The room felt warmer now. Or maybe it was him. "You've helped a lot of kids," he said carefully. Lorraine shrugged. "Kids help each other. Adults just like to take credit." Something in her phrasing tugged at him sharply. A memory surfaced. Not whole, just a sensation. Sitting on a curb, a tray of food, a voice that didn't rush. He shifted in his seat. Jabari glanced between them, sensing the change but not understanding it. "You all right?" "Yes," Nathaniel said quickly. "Just tired." Lorraine watched him more closely now. Her eyes lingered on his face, tracing lines, expressions, something beyond appearance. "You've been through things," she said. He nodded. "A long time ago." She studied him for another moment, then looked away as if respecting a boundary she hadn't named. "We all carry something," she said. "What matters is what we do with it." Nathaniel felt his throat tighten. There were too many overlaps now, too many echoes. The school, the phrasing, the quiet certainty. But doubt held him back. People helped people all the time, especially women like her, especially in this city. He couldn't let memory bend reality into something it wanted to see. And yet, Lorraine shifted, reaching toward the nightstand. Her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted a stack of old papers. One slipped free, fluttering to the floor. Nathaniel leaned forward instinctively to pick it up. It was an old flyer, faded ink, a community center fundraiser. His fingers brushed it, and a jolt ran through him. This was dangerous. He handed it back without comment. "Thank you," Lorraine said, her eyes meeting his again. Something passed between them then. Not recognition, not yet. Just the sense of two timelines brushing against each other, close enough to feel the heat. From the street outside came the distant sound of laughter. A car passed. Life continuing, indifferent. Nathaniel stood slowly. "I should go," he said, though he wasn't sure he meant it. Jabari looked surprised. "You don't have to." "I know," Nathaniel replied. "But I think I need to think." Lorraine nodded. "You're welcome back. I'd like that," he said. As he moved toward the door, his hand brushed his jacket pocket. He felt the familiar outline there, solid and small. The silver coin. His breath caught. He didn't take it out. Not yet. Some truths he knew needed time to breathe before they could be spoken aloud. He stepped outside into the night, the door closing softly behind him. On the porch, he paused, staring out at the quiet street, heart racing with a question he wasn't ready to answer. Not, "Is it her?" but, "What if it is? And what does that ask of me now?" Nathaniel didn't leave the porch. He stood there, the night pressing in softly, the house behind him breathing with the quiet rhythms of someone trying to rest. The question he'd carried out the door refused to loosen its grip, not because it was loud, but because it was precise. He turned back. Inside, the room looked the same as before. Same lamp, same shadows. But something in the air had shifted, as if it were waiting. Lorraine was awake, not sitting up, just alert. Her eyes followed him as he stepped closer, careful this time, as though the floor itself might object to haste. "I forgot something," he said. Jabari glanced up from the chair by the wall. "You okay?" Nathaniel nodded. He didn't trust his voice beyond that. He reached into his jacket pocket slowly, not ceremonially, just deliberately. His fingers closed around the familiar edge, worn smooth by years of touch. He drew his hand out and rested it closed on the small table between them. Lorraine watched. He opened his palm. The silver coin caught the lamplight and dulled it. Its surface was scarred with age. It didn't shine. It didn't need to. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Lorraine's breath changed. Not a gasp, a hitch. The kind that comes when the body recognizes something before the mind can catch up. Her eyes narrowed slightly, then widened, not with surprise, but with focus. She leaned forward a fraction, her hand lifting on instinct. Nathaniel didn't speak. Neither did Jabari. Lorraine's fingers hovered over the coin, trembling. She didn't touch it yet. She stared at it as if it might disappear if she did. "I haven't seen this in a long time," she said quietly. Nathaniel swallowed. She picked it up at last, turned it over once, then again. Her thumb traced the worn edge in a motion that was unmistakably practiced. Her hand shook harder now. "I used to give these to kids," she murmured. "Not many, just the ones who looked like they needed something solid to hold on to." Her eyes lifted slowly to Nathaniel's wrist. "There was a boy," she continued, voice thinning with memory. "Hungry, proud, always tried to say he was fine." A pause. "He had a mark right here." Nathaniel rolled his sleeve back. The birthmark was faint now, softened by time, but still there. Lorraine inhaled sharply. The sound broke. She stared at him, really stared, as if rearranging the past to make room for the present. Her grip tightened around the coin, knuckles whitening. "No," she whispered. Then softer, "My God." Nathaniel knelt beside her chair, the distance between them collapsing all at once. "It's me," he said. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I didn't know for sure. I didn't want to hurt you if I was wrong." Lorraine reached for his face with surprising strength. Her hands were warm, insistent. She cupped his cheek like she had done once before, years ago, on a cold curb. "Look at you," she said, tears spilling freely now. "You lived." Nathaniel closed his eyes as the words landed. Lived, not succeeded, not triumphed. Lived. Jabari stood frozen, eyes darting between them. "Grandma." Lorraine didn't look away from Nathaniel. "Baby," she said gently. "This man, he was a child I helped once, a long time ago." Nathaniel nodded. "She saved my life," he said simply. Silence filled the room. Not empty, but complete. The kind that holds everything it needs. Lorraine laughed softly through her tears. "I thought he was gone," she whispered. "I thought the city swallowed him." Nathaniel shook his head. "It tried." She pulled him into an embrace, fragile and fierce all at once. He held her carefully, as if afraid time might undo the moment if he moved too quickly. When they finally parted, the coin still rested in her hand. She pressed it back into his palm. "You kept it," she said. "I did," he replied. She smiled, exhausted and radiant. Then it did its job. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the circle it had just closed. Inside, nothing needed to be said yet. Some truths once spoken required quiet, not answers. From the outside, nothing seemed to change. The street kept its rhythm. The house stayed quiet. But inside, everything began to move offbeat. Nathaniel didn't return with gifts or promises. He made phone calls instead, Short, careful ones, spoken out of the way. Before long, a doctor came. He wasn't rushed. He wasn't showy. He spoke to Lorraine as if her time mattered. He listened, adjusted her medication, explained only what needed to be understood. Jabari watched from the doorway. He didn't interrupt. He didn't ask questions. He simply took it in. That night, Jabari didn't sit on the porch. He went straight to his room and closed the door a little harder than usual. The following morning, he left early, earlier than before. His backpack was set, his stride quick. He didn't look back. When they crossed paths later, Jabari barely slowed. "You okay?" Nathaniel asked. "Yeah," Jabari said. "Just busy." He kept walking. The distance didn't announce itself. It settled. A few nights later, they sat on the porch again. Space between them. "You don't have to do all this," Jabari said, eyes on the street. "Do what?" Nathaniel asked. "All of it," Jabari replied. "Feels the same." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes help shows up so fast it erases what someone's been doing to hold things together." Jabari's jaw tightened. "I don't want to think I was kind for this." "No one thinks that," Nathaniel said. "I do." The words stayed there, unanswered. After that, Jabari gave more. He carried a heavy crate to an old woman's porch, fixed a loose fence board with borrowed tools, sat on the curb beside a tired child and listened. Until the child stood up and went home. He didn't look around. He didn't wait to be seen. Nathaniel noticed anyway. That night, Jabari came home late. Lorraine was asleep. Nathaniel sat at the table with papers spread neatly in front of him. "You don't have to do that here," Jabari said. Nathaniel closed the folder. "I don't want everything we have to be because of you," Jabari said. "I don't want to owe you." "You don't?" Nathaniel replied. "That's not how it feels." Nathaniel nodded. "Even clean help changes the balance." Jabari exhaled, some tension loosening. "I just wanted my kindness to be normal." "It is," Nathaniel said. The next morning, Lorraine's condition dipped. Not sharply, just enough. Jabari noticed the change immediately. Her breathing, her hands, the spaces between blinks. For the first time in a long while, he didn't know what to do. Nathaniel came into the hallway. Jabari looked at him, fear breaking through his careful control. He didn't ask for money. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He asked one question. "What should I do now?" Nathaniel stepped forward without hesitation. "Okay," he said. "Let's take this one step at a time." And for the first time since help had arrived, it didn't feel heavy. It felt necessary. After that morning, Jabari's rhythm shifted. Not sharply, just enough to be felt. He still left early, backpack settled squarely on his shoulders. His steps were steady, lighter than before. On the block behind the house, he lifted a heavy crate from an old woman's trunk and carried it to her porch. When she tried to press money into his hand, he shook his head and stepped away. Later, he crouched beside two kids struggling with a bike chain. He watched them fail first, then showed them where to thread it back in. Once the bike rolled forward, he stood and walked off. Nathaniel watched from across the street. Jabari never looked up. Inside the house, Jabari stayed careful. When Nathaniel offered to pick up groceries, Jabari thanked him and went anyway. When Nathaniel mentioned a program he could help with, Jabari asked practical questions. How long? Who ran it? What happened if he stopped? And said nothing more. One evening, Nathaniel found Jabari scrubbing the kitchen sink. The counter was already clean. "You don't have to do that," Nathaniel said. "I know," Jabari replied. "I want to." Nathaniel hesitated. "You're not trying to earn anything." Jabari turned off the faucet, dried his hands slowly. "I'm trying to make sure I don't disappear." He didn't explain it. He didn't soften it. Nathaniel didn't argue. The next day, something changed. Nathaniel didn't ask where Jabari was going. He didn't check the window. He didn't comment when Jabari came home late. He stepped back without announcing it. Jabari noticed. One afternoon, Jabari came home carrying an extra bag of groceries and set it on the counter. "Neighbor had more than she needed," he said. "I said I'd pass it along." Nathaniel nodded. "Okay." Jabari waited. "You're not going to ask where I put it?" Nathaniel shook his head. "No." Jabari looked at him fully now. "I trust you," Nathaniel said. That was it. No explanation, no condition. Jabari nodded once. "Okay." That evening, they sat on the porch, the street humming softly around them. Jabari swung his legs, heels brushing the step. "I don't mind help," he said after a while. "I just don't want it to be the reason people see me." "It won't be," Nathaniel said. Jabari leaned back. The tension didn't vanish, but it eased. For the first time since help had entered his life, Jabari felt something hold without pressing. Not control, not certainty, balance. The night didn't announce itself as a crisis. It slipped in quietly between the ticking clock, a passing car, the low hum of the refrigerator. Jabari had already brushed his teeth, folded his clothes for the morning. Lorraine had gone to bed early, tired but steady. He lay awake anyway. Then he heard it. A change so small it would have passed unnoticed by anyone not listening for it. Lorraine's breathing off rhythm, slower, faster. A pause that lingered just a beat too long. Jabari sat up. He waited, listened again. Another pause. He was at her bedside in seconds. The lamp cast a dim light across her face. Her eyes were half open, unfocused. One hand gripped the blanket, fingers trembling. "Grandma," he whispered. No answer. Her hand felt warmer than it should have. He forced himself to slow down. Check. Don't assume. He counted her breaths. Too shallow, too fast. He opened the medicine organizer, scanned the labels. Everything looked right. Nothing felt right. "Okay," he murmured. Her eyes flickered. Her lips parted. No sound came out. That was when fear hit, clean and sharp, leaving no room for debate. He reached for his phone, then stopped. His thoughts collided without landing anywhere. For years, he had handled things alone. This wasn't that. He pressed his palm against the wall, grounded himself. A floorboard creaked behind him. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, already awake. "Jabari." Jabari turned for a moment. Habit rose. "It's fine. I've got it." He almost took the weight back, but the fear was louder. He didn't ask for money. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He asked one question. "What should I do now?" Nathaniel crossed the room at once, not rushed, not hesitant. One glance took everything in. "Okay," he said calmly. "We're going to slow this down." He checked Lorraine's pulse, counted, then looked at Jabari. "You did the right thing," he said. "All of it." "I don't know what this is," Jabari said. "That's all right," Nathaniel replied. "You don't have to." He lifted his phone. "I'm calling for help. Not because you failed, because this is bigger than one person." Jabari nodded as Nathaniel spoke to the operator, steady and precise. Jabari stayed by the bed, holding his grandmother's hand, whispering her name when her breathing faltered. The paramedics arrived quickly. Quiet efficiency filled the house. Jabari stepped back, unsure of his place. Nathaniel stayed close. "They're here," he said. "You don't have to do anything right now." Lorraine was stabilized enough to move, enough to breathe easier. At the door, a paramedic paused. "You coming with us?" Jabari froze. He looked at Nathaniel. Nathaniel didn't answer for him. He waited. "Yes," Jabari said. In the ambulance, red and white light flashed against the windows. Jabari watched the monitor rise and fall, hands clenched in his lap. Nathaniel sat across from him, close enough to matter. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do," Nathaniel said. "I didn't know what to do." "That's the point," Nathaniel replied. "Knowing when you don't know, that's when you ask. I didn't want to depend on you." "This isn't dependence," Nathaniel said. "It's trust." At the hospital, the night broke into fragments. Forms, questions, waiting rooms heavy with disinfectant and old coffee. Jabari answered when he could. When he couldn't, Nathaniel filled the gaps without taking over. Eventually, a doctor came out. "She's stable," he said. "We caught it early." Jabari exhaled. Later, sitting side by side, exhaustion settled in. "I thought I was supposed to handle everything," Jabari said. "You're supposed to handle what's yours," Nathaniel replied, "and ask for help when it's not." Jabari looked at him, not as someone rescuing him, but as someone who had stood with him. "Thank you," Nathaniel nodded. "Anytime." They sat in silence. Outside, the city went on, unaware of the line just crossed, not from strength to weakness, but from isolation to something steadier. Jabari didn't feel smaller for asking. He felt, for the first time, appropriately held. The hospital days passed without drama. No miracles, no confessions whispered in hallways, just steady motion. Charts checked, IVs adjusted, machines humming through nights that never fully slept. Lorraine stayed stable, not strong, not safe, but anchored. Nathaniel worked from the edges. He spoke with administrators, social workers, coordinators, asked careful questions, waited for clear answers. Long-term care, medication delivery, a home health nurse. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was framed as a favor. Jabari noticed when the social worker returned the next afternoon. She spoke to Jabari directly. "You're listed as her primary family contact," she said. "We'll need your input on the care plan." Jabari blinked. "Mine?" "Yes, you live with her." Nathaniel sat 2 chairs away, silent. Jabari glanced at him, waiting out of habit for him to step in. He didn't. He stayed where he was. "Okay," Jabari said. "What do you need to know?" They talked for nearly an hour. Jabari explained routines, habits, what calmed Lorraine, what unsettled her. He asked questions of his own. The social worker listened and took notes. Nathaniel watched, relieved and restrained. This was the point, not to replace Jabari, but to make sure no one else did. Over the next days, arrangements settled into place. A nurse scheduled regular visits. Medications were organized through a community program. Transportation options were confirmed. Every form listed institutions, services, programs. None listed Nathaniel's name. One afternoon, Jabari watched Nathaniel review the paperwork at the kitchen table. "You could have just paid for all of this," Jabari said. "I could have," Nathaniel replied. "Why didn't you?" "Because then it would belong to me," Nathaniel said. "And this doesn't." Jabari nodded, slow and thoughtful. "So none of this disappears if you leave?" "No," Nathaniel said. "It's not attached to me." That night, Lorraine was awake long enough to listen as Jabari explained the plan. When he finished, she looked at him. "You did all this?" Jabari hesitated. "We did." Lorraine smiled faintly, then glanced at Nathaniel. "You careful," she said. He smiled. "I try." In the days that followed, Jabari stopped watching for the catch. When Nathaniel said he'd be out, Jabari believed him. Trust settled, not through reassurance, but through repetition. One evening, Jabari found Nathaniel on the porch. "You never asked me to do anything back," Jabari said. Nathaniel looked at him. "Is that bothering you?" "It's confusing." "That's fair. Most help comes with expectations." "I know," Nathaniel said. "So let me be clear." Jabari waited. "You don't owe me anything. Not now. Not ever." Jabari studied his face, searching for conditions. "And if I mess up?" he asked. If I make choices you don't agree with? Then you'll be a kid making choices, Nathaniel said. Like you're allowed to. Jabari exhaled. So you're not keeping score? No. Okay. The word landed clean. Later that week, Jabari paused in the doorway before heading out. I'm helping Mr. Thompson with his shed tomorrow. I might be late. Nathaniel nodded. Thanks for telling me. That was all. That night, Jabari worked easily in the kitchen, talking about school, a book he'd started, a teacher who reminded him of someone he couldn't place. Nathaniel listened without guiding the conversation. When the house grew quiet, Jabari spoke again. I was worried that once things got easier, I'd feel smaller. Nathaniel waited. But I don't, Jabari said. I feel like I can breathe. Nathaniel nodded. That's how you know it's being done right. Jabari leaned back, tension draining from his shoulders. Not gratitude, not relief, safety. Outside, the city kept its rhythm. Inside the small house, help had found its proper shape. And because of that, Jabari finally had space for questions that weren't about survival. Questions about family, about absence, about the man who wasn't there. When those questions came, Nathaniel would be listening. The afternoon arrived without urgency. No appointments, no calls to return, just the quiet stretch of time that followed crisis. When the body finally realized it was allowed to stand down, sunlight filtered through the trees and settled on the porch in soft, uneven patches. Jabari sat on the top step, shoes off, heels resting against the wood. He wasn't watching the street so much as listening to it. Voices passing, a car radio humming, the familiar rhythm of a neighborhood that didn't ask to be fixed. Nathaniel joined him a moment later, lowering himself onto the step beside him. He didn't bring papers. He didn't bring plans. He brought nothing at all. They sat like that for a while. Jabari broke the silence first. Can I ask you something? Nathaniel nodded. Of course. Jabari stared out at the sidewalk, words gathering slowly. What if one day I don't help anyone? What if I'm just tired? Or I don't notice? Or I don't have it in me? Does that mean I stop being who I am? The question wasn't anxious. It was careful, honest. Nathaniel leaned back slightly, resting his palms against the step. No, he said. It means you're human. Jabari frowned. It doesn't feel like that. That's because you've been carrying more than your share for a long time, Nathaniel replied. When helping becomes your identity, it starts to feel like you disappear the moment you rest. Jabari considered this. Isn't that what you're supposed to do, though? Give until it's gone? Nathaniel shook his head gently. That's what people say when they confuse sacrifice with worth. Jabari glanced at him, surprised. Kindness isn't a resource you're meant to exhaust, Nathaniel continued. It's not something you prove by suffering. It doesn't stop existing just because you step back. Jabari was quiet again, processing. My grandma always says you shouldn't turn your back on people, he said. She's right, Nathaniel replied. But turning your back isn't the same as sitting down. Jabari let out a short breath, half a laugh. That sounds like something you learned the hard way. Nathaniel nodded. I did. He didn't elaborate, and Jabari didn't ask. A breeze moved through the trees, stirring the leaves overhead. The porch creaked softly beneath them. So, Jabari said after a while, it's okay if I don't always say yes. Yes, Nathaniel said. And it's okay if you don't always see what needs doing. Jabari's shoulders eased slightly. What if someone needs me and I miss it? Nathaniel turned to him. Then someone else will notice, or it will wait, or it will be something that wasn't yours to carry in the first place. Jabari absorbed that slowly. I always thought if I stopped, things would fall apart, he admitted. Nathaniel smiled, not unkindly. They won't. And if they do, that's not proof you should have kept going alone. It's proof you were never meant to. Jabari leaned back on his hands, looking up at the sky. The clouds moved lazily overhead, unconcerned. You know, he said, Sometimes I help people because I'm scared of what happens if I don't. Nathaniel nodded. That's honest. Jabari turned to him. Is that bad? No, Nathaniel replied. It just means you're allowed to learn another reason. Jabari thought about that. After a moment, he said, I don't want to become someone who only feels useful when I'm giving something away. Nathaniel's voice softened. You won't. Not if you remember that you're allowed to be here, even when your hands are empty. The words settled between them, unforced. Inside the house, Lorraine shifted in her chair, the sound faint but reassuring. Jabari glanced toward the door, then back to the street. I've been tired, he said quietly. Nathaniel nodded. I know, and I didn't want to say it. Jabari continued, because I thought that meant I was changing. Nathaniel met his eyes. You are changing. That's the point. Jabari smiled faintly at that. They sat together as the afternoon deepened, neither rushing the moment. The lesson wasn't delivered like advice. It unfolded naturally, like something Jabari had already known, but needed permission to accept. Kindness didn't require disappearance. Care didn't demand collapse. Rest wasn't betrayal. As the light shifted and the shadows lengthened, Jabari felt something unfamiliar but welcome take root. Not urgency, not obligation, allowance. And in that space, quiet, earned, and intact, new questions began to surface. Questions about where he came from, about who had left, about the absence that had never been given language. He didn't ask them yet, but for the first time he knew he would be allowed to. The question came without warning. Not during a heavy moment, not after a difficult day. It arrived in the space between ordinary things when the house was calm and the evening hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. Jabari was rinsing a plate at the sink. Nathaniel sat at the small table, reading through mail Lorraine had asked him to look over. The window was open, letting in the sounds of the block. Someone laughing. A screen door closing. A dog barking once and stopping. Jabari didn't turn around when he spoke. Do you ever think, he said slowly, that someone can leave even if they love you? Nathaniel looked up, but Jabari kept his eyes on the running water. The question hung there, unfinished but unmistakable. Yes, Nathaniel said after a moment. I do. Jabari nodded as if he'd expected that answer. My dad left when I was little, he continued. His voice stayed level, careful. I don't really remember him, just pieces, a jacket, his laugh, maybe, or maybe that part I made up. Nathaniel listened without interrupting. He didn't say goodbye, Jabari said. He just stopped being there. The water kept running. Jabari turned it off and dried his hand slowly, buying time. I don't feel mad, he added. Not really. I just keep wondering what I missed. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. What do you wonder about? Jabari shrugged. If he thought about me, if he wanted to come back, if he left because things were hard, or because I was. The last word landed quietly, but it stayed. Nathaniel didn't respond right away. He knew this kind of moment. How fragile it was. How easily the wrong reassurance could harden into something permanent. Jabari glanced at him, then looked away again. I know people say it's not the kid's fault, he said. I know that's the right answer, but it doesn't stop the thought from showing up, Nathaniel said gently. It just gets quieter, Jabari finished. Yeah, Nathaniel nodded. That's true. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't rush toward comfort. My grandma doesn't talk about him much, Jabari said. When she does, she's careful, like she's trying not to break something that's already cracked. Nathaniel pictured Lorraine's pauses, her measured words. She carries a lot of history, he said. Jabari leaned against the counter. I don't blame her. I just sometimes want to know what kind of person he was before he left. That's a reasonable thing to want, Nathaniel replied. Jabari hesitated. Do you think knowing would help? Nathaniel considered that. I think knowing the truth usually helps more than guessing, even when the truth isn't kind. Jabari absorbed that quietly. I used to think if I was good enough, he'd come back, Jabari said. Like maybe he was waiting for me to turn into someone worth staying for. Nathaniel felt something tighten in his chest. That's a heavy thing for a kid to carry, he said. Jabari shrugged again, smaller this time. I stopped thinking that a while ago, I think. Nathaniel met his gaze. And now? Jabari looked down. Now I just want to understand. Not to fix anything. Just to know. The porch light flicked on automatically as the sky darkened. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Understanding doesn't always bring closure, he said. But it can take away the parts where you blame yourself for things that never belong to you. Jabari looked up at that. You really believe that? Yes, Nathaniel said. Because I've lived with unanswered questions, and they grow sharper the longer they stay unnamed. Jabari was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, what if he left because he wasn't strong enough? Nathaniel didn't hesitate. Then that would say something about him, not about you. Jabari pressed his lips together, eyes shining but steady. I think that's what scares me. What? Nathaniel asked. That it might be true, Jabari said. And that even if it is, it still hurts. Nathaniel nodded. Both things can exist at the same time. Jabari turned away, staring out the window at the streetlights coming on one by one. I don't hate him, he said. I don't even know if I could. I just don't want to carry this forever. Nathaniel stood and moved closer, stopping a respectful distance away. You don't have to decide what you feel about him right now, he said. You just have to stop turning his absence into a judgment about yourself. Jabari swallowed. That's harder than it sounds. I know, Nathaniel replied, but it gets easier when you're not doing it alone. Jabari glanced at him, surprised by the phrasing. You mean Grandma? He asked. And me, Nathaniel said. If you want. Jabari didn't answer right away. I don't need you to find him, he said carefully. I'm not asking for that. Nathaniel held his gaze. I know. Jabari studied his face as if checking for hidden intent. I just needed to say it out loud. Nathaniel nodded. I'm glad you did. The conversation didn't end neatly. There were no conclusions, no promises wrapped in certainty, but something shifted subtly, irrevocably. Later that night, Jabari lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't press in. He thought about his father, not as a shadow, but as a person shaped by choices he didn't understand yet. For the first time, the thought didn't circle back to, what was wrong with me? Instead, it paused at, what happened to him? In the other room, Nathaniel sat at the table long after the house had gone still. He stared at nothing in particular, Jabari's words echoing in his mind. He understood now where the deepest wound lived, not in poverty, not in fear, but in unanswered absence. He also understood the danger. Some truths healed, some disrupted. Some arrived too late to fix anything but still mattered. Nathaniel didn't decide anything that night. He didn't make calls. He didn't open files. He didn't begin a search. He only acknowledged the weight of what Jabari had shared and the responsibility of hearing it. Because once a question like that was spoken aloud, it didn't disappear. It waited. And sooner or later, someone would have to decide whether silence was kinder than truth. The city outside kept moving, unaware of the quiet line being drawn, a line between wondering and knowing. And Nathaniel, sitting alone in the dim kitchen light, realized that when the time came, choosing to cross it would change more than one life. Nathaniel didn't tell Jabari what he was doing, not because he was hiding it, but because some actions lost their integrity the moment they were explained too early. This was one of them. He began with what he knew: names, dates, old addresses written in handwriting that had faded but not disappeared. Conversations Lorraine had spoken carefully around. details she never lingered on. Nathaniel didn't ask her directly. He listened instead, letting fragments surface on their own. Terrell Ellis. The name appeared more than once in old records attached to different versions of the same man. Similar age, similar neighborhoods, different outcomes. Nathaniel moved quietly through systems he understood well. Public records first, then shelter databases, old clinic intake forms, rehabilitation centers that had changed names more than once. Each search ended the same way: partial matches, missing years, unanswered calls. He learned quickly what Terrell was not dead, not incarcerated, not officially missing. Which somehow made it harder. One afternoon, a social worker from a community clinic returned his call. "We had someone by that name," she said cautiously. "A few years back. Stayed for a while. Kept his head down." "Do you still see him?" Nathaniel asked. "No," she replied. "But he left clean. That doesn't always happen." That detail lingered. Nathaniel followed this trail outward, away from the city center into the quieter edges where people went when they were tired of being seen. He drove through neighborhoods that didn't advertise themselves, where houses blended together and days passed without markers. Eventually, a lead stuck. A small outpatient clinic on the outskirts of the city. Not new, not well-funded, but consistent. The receptionist recognized the name immediately. "He still comes by sometimes," she said. "Volunteers, helps clean up." Nathaniel paused. "Could I speak with him?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I can ask," she said, "but I can't promise anything." 2 days later, the call came back. He said no. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. Did he say why? He said he's not who anyone needs anymore. The words carried weight. Nathaniel didn't argue. He didn't push. He asked only one more question. Did he ask about his family? The receptionist hesitated. Yes, that was enough. Nathaniel asked her to pass along a message, not an invitation, not a request, just the truth. Your mother is alive. Your son is too. They are okay. You are not being asked for anything. A week passed. Then another. Nathaniel didn't tell Jabari. He didn't change his behavior. He listened when Jabari talked about school, about small things, about nothing in particular. He let life continue at its own pace. Inside, the question churned. Was this right? Even if Terrell agreed to meet, what then? Jabari hadn't asked for reunion. He hadn't asked for explanations. He had asked for understanding. Sometimes understanding came without contact. Sometimes it didn't. The call came late one evening. Nathaniel stepped outside to take it. I don't want to hurt him, Terrell said. His voice was rough, measured by years of restraint. I already did that once. You didn't disappear from his life, Nathaniel replied carefully. You disappeared from yourself. There was a quiet exhale on the other end. I'm not asking you to fix anything, Nathaniel continued. I'm asking you to tell the truth, and only if you're willing. Silence stretched. I don't want him to think I left because he wasn't enough, Terrell said. Then don't let that be the story, Nathaniel replied. Another pause. Where? Terrell asked. They agreed on a place that didn't belong to memory. A small room at a community center outside the city. Neutral. Uncharged. No ghosts clinging to the walls. Nathaniel didn't tell Jabari yet. Not because he was afraid, but because timing mattered. Jabari deserved truth, not surprise. The night before the meeting, Nathaniel sat alone in his car, engine off, streetlight humming overhead. He thought about Lorraine, about Jabari, about the line between healing and harm. He knew one thing for certain. Reunion was not the goal. Truth was. And sometimes truth arrived quietly, without apology, without promises, without guarantees of forgiveness. The next morning, Nathaniel sat across from Terrell for the first time. The man looked older than his years, thinner. His hands bore the marks of work, not neglect. His eyes were clear, steady in a way that suggested long effort rather than ease. "I never stopped thinking about him," Terrell said. "I just didn't think I deserved to be remembered." Nathaniel nodded. "That's not your decision to make." Terrell swallowed. "Will he hate me?" Nathaniel didn't soften the answer. "He might." Terrell nodded once. "I can live with that. What he won't do," Nathaniel added, "is keep blaming himself. Not once he hears it from you." That was when Terrell closed his eyes. "Okay," he said. "Tell him." Nathaniel leaned back slightly. "I will, and then I'll let him decide." As Nathaniel drove back toward the city, the weight of what lay ahead settled fully onto his shoulders. The search had ended, but the harder part, the part that required no systems, no leverage, no preparation, was just beginning. And this time, silence would no longer be the safer choice. The room was smaller than Jabari expected, plain, neutral. A folding table, 3 chairs, a window that looked out onto a parking lot instead of a memory. The kind of place chosen on purpose, nothing in it asking anyone to feel more than they were ready for. Nathaniel stood near the door. Terrell sat already, hands folded, back straight but tense. He didn't stand when Jabari entered. He didn't smile. Jabari stopped just inside the room. For a long moment, no one spoke. Terrell looked different from the man Jabari had imagined. Not frightening, not heroic, just tired. Older than his age. His hair threaded with gray, his face marked by years that hadn't been kind, but hadn't destroyed him either. Jabari felt nothing all at once, then everything, layered and indistinct. Nathaniel cleared his throat quietly. "I'll be right outside," he said. Neither of them acknowledged it. He left anyway, closing the door gently behind him. The silence settled. Terrell was the first to move, not toward Jabari, but slightly back in his chair, as if giving space even now. "I'm glad you came," he said. Jabari didn't answer. Terrell nodded, accepting the absence of response. "I don't know what you need from me," he continued, "so I'm not going to guess." Jabari crossed his arms slowly. "Why did you leave?" There it was. Not shouted, not wrapped in anger, just placed on the table between them. Terrell took a breath, let it out carefully. "Because I wasn't strong enough to stay, and I was scared of what I'd turn into if I didn't leave." Jabari waited. "I thought if I stepped away, I'd stop hurting the people I loved," Terrell continued. "I told myself that was protection. It wasn't. It was avoidance." Jabari's jaw tightened. "Did you ever think about coming back?" Terrell nodded immediately. "Every day." "Then why didn't you?" Terrell looked down at his hands. "Because every year that passed made it harder to believe I wouldn't make things worse." Jabari felt something shift, not soften, not forgive, but loosen. A knot he hadn't known had shape. "So you just decided we were better off without you," Jabari said. Terrell looked up. "I decided you were better than the version of me I was." The words didn't land cleanly. They weren't meant to. Jabari exhaled slowly. "You don't get to decide that for me." "I know," Terrell said. "That's why I'm here now." Silence again. Jabari studied him. Really studied him. The steady eyes, the absence of excuses, the way he didn't lean forward, didn't reach, didn't ask for anything. "You're sober," Jabari said. "Yes." "For how long?" "More than 2 years now." Jabari nodded. "Good." It wasn't praise. It wasn't dismissal. Just acknowledgement. Terrell swallowed. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I don't expect a relationship. I just don't want you to carry the idea that you weren't enough." Jabari felt the words land somewhere deep, quiet. "I don't know what I feel," Jabari said after a while. "And I'm not going to pretend I do." Terrell nodded. "That's fair." "I'm not ready to forgive you," Jabari added. Terrell didn't flinch. I wouldn't trust it if you were. Jabari almost smiled. Almost. They sat there, two people connected by history, but no longer trapped inside it. No apologies piled high. No promises made too soon. At the door, Jabari paused. I don't hate you, he said. I just don't know you. Terrell's voice was steady when he replied. That's a start I didn't think I'd ever get. Jabari nodded once and left the room. Nathaniel stood up when he saw him. You okay? Jabari considered the question. I think so, he said. Not fixed, but lighter. Nathaniel nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. As they walked out into the afternoon, Jabari didn't look back. He didn't need to. Some wounds didn't close in a single moment. They stopped bleeding first. And for Jabari, that was enough to keep moving forward. The afternoon looked ordinary. Sunlight stretched across the sidewalk in long, uneven bands. A breeze moved lazily through the trees, lifting the edges of old flyers taped to lampposts. The block carried on the way it always had, quiet, persistent, unconcerned with conclusions. Nathaniel stood across the street, hands in his pockets. He wasn't watching closely. He didn't need to. Jabari stood near the corner store, school bag slung over one shoulder. A younger boy lingered nearby, too thin for the season, shoes a size too small, eyes darting with the kind of alertness that came from learning early how to stay unnoticed. Jabari spoke to him calmly. No rush, no authority in his voice. He reached into his bag and handed the boy a wrapped sandwich, then paused before adding a small bottle of water. The boy hesitated, looked up, looked down. Jabari didn't push it into his hands. He waited. The boy took it. Thanks, he muttered. Jabari nodded once. You're good. Nothing more. The boy walked away, already halfway down the block before he looked back. Jabari was still standing there, not watching, not checking, just existing. Nathaniel felt something settle in his chest. This wasn't the boy he'd met at the coffee stand, and it wasn't someone unrecognizable either. Jabari hadn't hardened. He hadn't softened into something performative. He had learned where the line was and how to stay on the right side of it. Jabari turned and spotted Nathaniel across the street. Their eyes met briefly. Jabari lifted his chin in acknowledgement, then headed home. On the porch, Lorraine sat wrapped in a light blanket, watching the day pass. Jabari greeted her, set his bag down, and joined her without ceremony. No rush, no sense of obligation. Nathaniel stayed where he was. He didn't intervene. He didn't comment. He didn't step closer. He understood now that some moments were meant to be witnessed, not guided. The city breathed around them, cars passing, voices rising and falling, life continuing without pause. Nothing had been fixed in the grand sense. The world hadn't changed its shape. But something had shifted quietly. Jabari had learned that kindness didn't require him to disappear, that help could exist without debt, that truth, even painful truth, could lighten a load instead of adding to it. Nathaniel turned away and began to walk. He didn't feel the need to circle back to check in, to make sure the moment held. Some things didn't need protection once they were understood. Behind him, Jabari laughed softly at something Lorraine said. Ahead of him, the street opened into the rest of the city. Not every life needed to be rescued. Not every story needed repair. Some only needed to be seen clearly and allowed to continue intact. And in that quiet understanding, the circle finally rested. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of the quiet power of kindness, the courage it takes to face what we've carried alone, and the healing that becomes possible when someone simply stays, consider subscribing to the channel. Here we share more stories of unexpected connections, second chances, and the enduring strength of the human heart. Turn on notifications so you never miss a tale that might just stay with you long after it ends. Thank you for being here. Until the next story.